So welcome to the weekly Ellevate Roundtable. I'm Allison Matizik, the VP of Enterprise Sales, joined by our co-host Joanna Polgarin, our Senior Program Manager. To make the most of our time together, I want to share a few expectations for the group. So we encourage active listening, give your full attention to the speaker and what other attendees are sharing. Turn your video on when possible. It helps us feel more comfortable in a room of familiar faces. Share bravely and participate in breakout rooms. So we want to share and listen with other members in your room. Have respect for attendees. This is a judgment-free zone, and come in with an open mind. And lastly, support one another. This can be just advice or solidarity in another member's situation. And I want to give a warm welcome to our chapter leaders, corporate partners, anyone who is joining us for the first time. And today we're going to be talking about navigating transitions to successfully create organizational change. Our guest expert is joining us all the way from South Africa. Zanele Njapa is a transitions facilitator and future of work speaker. She's going to help us learn a clear understanding of key insights that primarily drive resistance to change within teams, the ability to apply a simple, practical, and fun framework to encourage buy-in during organizational change, and use it to support each other, and a deep appreciation for the holistic impacts that drive successful transitions. So Zanele, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Allison, for that beautiful introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Zanele, as I've been introduced. It's lovely to be in the room as a fellow Ellevate member. I think when we're in community in these groups, it just feels so amazing. The energy is always so great. So I see faces that I recognize. I see faces that are brand new. So it's lovely to see all of you and to be in the room with you today. The conversation we're going to have today, for me, it's evening actually, and for you, it might be any other time, but the conversation we're going to have today is really a simple one. You might have heard a few of the concepts we're going to chat about, but I would love for you, just like Allison asked right in the beginning, to keep an open mind. If something sounds familiar, I'd like you to challenge yourself to say, how familiar is it really? How have I practiced it, and how is it working for me? So that's a big challenge I'm going to put out there to you today. And the way I want to start this conversation is really by telling you a quick story. I am known to my clients as the unlearning lady, because I help a lot of my clients with change and unlearning and letting go of mindsets and perspectives that they need to challenge. But I had one of the best examples around unlearning when I was sitting at Starbucks, funny enough. I was sitting there and a little girl comes in with someone I assume is her mother, and they sit together right next to me, and the little girl orders a Cinnabon. Now, the Cinnabon looks absolutely amazing. Now, not to say I was eyeing her Cinnabon, but it looked absolutely amazing. I looked over and she bit into it, and you could just see the joy on her face as she bit that Cinnabon. And she said something to her mother, and she said, "Mom, you know what? This is the best day of my life." And I just thought, oh my goodness, wow. And then the mother turned around, and I thought, my goodness, the response she gave, she said to the child, "But you always say that. You always say it's the best day of your life." And just when I was starting to feel quite disappointed for this little girl, the girl then turned around and said something I don't think I'll ever forget. And I hope if you take nothing else from these 10 minutes, it's at least that story. She turned around and she said, "Well, Mom, today is the new best day of my life." And as someone who's got a background in teaching, I am consistently reminded of how that perspective of unlearning and relearning is so beautifully taught by children. And that's basically what it means. That's the conversation we're going to have today. How do you build a culture where people say today is new, and the solutions that we impart and work on today are not necessarily the ones we worked on yesterday, but how do we do it optimistically? Especially during a time when so many of our teams are change fatigued and nobody wants to change anymore because it's gone on for too long, it's overwhelming, it's tiring. But how do we get people to say, this is the new best day? I'm going to try again. I'm going to make it work. So I'd like to invite you to enter the word unlearn in the chat if you are familiar with the concept of unlearning, just so I can get a bit of a dipstick in the room as to where more or less we stand when it comes to that concept, because the idea of unlearning is the conversation we're going to have today, but with regards to guiding the process around transitioning in our teams, especially if you are in a position where you feel like there is a need for psychological safety within the team that you're leading. And like Alison so beautifully said, all I'm going to share with you today is just a two-step framework that's going to help you to just do it a little bit better, and not necessarily to support those you lead better, but more than anything else, how do we support ourselves? Because sometimes it's us that need help. I remember I had a very interesting woman who came up to me once, and she was leading one of the major banks. And she said in South Africa, and she said to me, Zanele, I've just come back from maternity leave, and the team has changed so much has gone by. And the truth is, I feel like I'm out of touch. And it was so real, because so many of us feel that. I mean, you close your email now, you wake up tomorrow morning and it feels like the whole world has changed. So how do we help people to feel that sense of safety, so that they know that whatever happens around the corner, they can manage it? And this is a safe space. So let's talk about what that framework might be. So before we do that, perhaps I'd like to just get an understanding of where you are with regards to today's conversation. What is the perspective you are coming in with? Are you coming into today's conversation with the intention of increasing buy-in? Maybe the team that you're working with is going in a new direction, you're launching a new product, you're introducing a new system. Is it that you're here because you want to increase buy-in towards that product or new direction? Or perhaps you're here because you want to just help everyone feel a little less anxious than they do already. And number three, which is the very last one that will really help me understand where we are in the room, and then we can expand on this when we go into our breakout rooms, is, are you just here to support yourself? Which is perfectly fine, because the better you can support yourself, then you can pour out to others, right? So I think that's that. Don't be ashamed if that's why you're here. You're just going, how do I support myself, Zanele, through this? So let me have a quick look at the chat. Okay, so we've got 2 2s. Wow, what are the chances? Mary Ann, you say all 3. I love that. 2 and 3. Leah, you say 2 and 3. Christiana, I'm definitely in the first group. I'm responsible for the new direction solely at my organization. I'd be very interested, Christiana, to hear a little bit more about that. And hopefully in the breakout rooms, I will jump into a group where you are sharing some of your insights and your experiences. So thank you very much for putting those in the chat. And without further ado, let's get right into it. What are these 2 steps and why are they important? Before I share the 2 steps, I want to introduce where the big idea behind them comes from. You might have read this book, and if you have, let me know in the chat. But one of the key ideas around what it means to transition and some of the best ways to do it really have come from William Bridges. I don't want to say father of transitions, because I absolutely dislike that term, but really someone who has shaped a lot of the ideas around this space is William Bridges. And in his book, he shares the idea that a transition and a change are 2 different things, which I think is a beautiful concept. And when we can understand that the transition is the systematic changes, it's the logistical changes, it's the fact that now the people from the company we are merging with have come into our office and we're all working together. So it's the practical stuff around the change. But then he says something really profound. He says that the change then is what happens in here, in everyone's hearts. Have people actually let go and grabbed hold? That's the change. And often what happens is that we transition, but we don't change. So let's look at the 2 steps that I'm going to introduce to you that are really going to help you to build that sense of psychological safety, to speak directly to a brain that is freaking out because things never stop changing. But more than anything, these 2 steps are going to help you build a culture that can hold the change you're going through now, but also the changes that come in the future. Okay, let's get right into it. And if any questions come up, I'm happy to have you put them in the chat, and then I'll field those questions if we have a few seconds. Otherwise, we will come back to them after our breakout rooms, which still should give us enough time. So number one is all about grieving. And this is a very strange one. When I introduce this one, people go, what do you mean grieving? Now, think about it. When you and I lose anything, which is actually what happens during a change process, you are losing a sense of self. Because think about it. Maybe let me give you an example. If we used to do things one way at company X, I, over time, associate my identity with that process, with that manager, with that leader. And so when they leave, I now almost have to recreate who I am, or almost find a new sense of self. And that's how deep change is. Oftentimes, as leaders, we approach change with, let's go, everyone, here's the new direction, jump on board or get left behind. But we forget that during a transition, people are letting go of something. And so why not do the one thing that supports you and I when we grieve in other, or when we lose things in other senses? If you think about the grieving process when it comes to so many other things, losing loved ones, losing a range of different things, there's a process we actually go through that helps us to let go. Why not bring this into our teams as a process that we actually go through? And the big idea behind the grieving process when it comes to organizational change is it's just validation. We're not saying let's dig up all of the skeletons and talk about who did what wrong and what wasn't right, but let's grieve collectively. Let's validate how you feel like the new change or your new salary doesn't allow you to provide for your sick grandmother. Where is the room that we make as leaders to validate those emotions? And practically, I'm a huge believer in the one thing because I do a lot of speaking, and oftentimes we end off with so many insights. So just one thing that you can try when it comes to the grieving process as you help your team through a transition is just having collective reminiscing sessions. So this can be something that you do every now and again. It can just be something that you do at the beginning of a forum that already exists within the team to say, okay, how do you feel about the way that things used to be? What do you feel is different from how we used to do things to how we do it now? One of the best ways that I've seen this being done is one-on-one. Certain leaders will do it just as a conversation between myself as a leader and the individuals that I'm leading. It can be during coffee chats that you already have scheduled with them to just say, talk me through what you've had to go through or what you've lost as an individual through that process. The second part of that, and we'll go into it a little bit just now, but is also sharing what you've lost. Because the halo effect when it comes to change is very, very real. And what do I mean by the halo effect? The halo effect that leaders don't feel what we feel. You're not going through what I'm going through. How do you know how painful it is? How do you know what it's like to lose half of your salary? But the truth is we do. Yes, we're in positions where we get to make a lot of the decisions or we hold some level of power in an organization. But the truth is we are also going through so much of what you're going through. And so the second part that couples beautifully with grieving is transparency. Now, before we start to get all, oh my goodness, how much transparency is too much? Let me explain what I mean by transparency. All that I mean by transparency is help them to understand why. You might know this as a with them or what's in it for me. This concept has never been more important than it is now. When individuals like myself, Zillennials, Gen Zs, Millennials want to work with organizations that call to their reason for being. I'll show you what I mean. Blink twice for me. I won't ask anyone to raise hands because this one can be a bit touchy. Blink twice for me if when you wake up in the morning, you say to yourself, oh, another beautiful day. I can't wait to fulfill my organization's purpose. It gives me so much love. Let's do this. Let me see if I can see any of the blinks. Mary, it looks like you're trying not to blink, or is that just me? Now, see, that's the thing. We don't necessarily wake up with that. And if we do, what I've found is that it's only because we have managed to create a link between what we wake up for in the morning and what the organization stands for. And that's the link you want to help your team create. Now, it can come in a range of different forms. It might mean that the individual gets involved with a CSR project or CSI project that we have in the organization. It might even mean that the individual moves to a different brand within the organization. One thing I've seen done so beautifully within Unilever specifically is that an individual was very passionate about challenging beauty stereotypes. And this was a big thing for her. So she was moved over by choice to the Dove team. because Dove as a collective brand stands for championing beauty, regardless of what it looks like, but all across the spectrum. And that was how she created her link, or that's how her link came about. Because at the end of the day, when we wake up in the morning, we wake up for us. And if we're going to spend so much time at work, second only to sleep, then we might as well be doing it for something that we're passionate about, that drives us, that gives us a sense of purpose. And we found that beautiful link. So I will wrap up on that point. And I don't know, I'm just going to ask Joanna and Alison to sort of guide me here on how we're doing for time and all sorts of things. But I think if we go into our breakout rooms now, it'll be a really great place for us to not only have this discussion, but come back and we can possibly even do a Q&A if that's needed. But I love shared knowledge and the fact that everyone in the room has something to share that's valuable. So here's our question for our breakout rooms as we go into them. All I'm going to ask is that you just think about one thing. What's one thing that you could possibly try? And maybe it's not something new. Maybe it's just a tiny tweak to something that you're already doing. Or maybe it's just challenging something that's currently being done by the team that you work with. Maybe because you feel like it's ineffective, it could be done better, whatever it is. What's the one thing you're going to walk away with? Because yes, we could write a list of 5 things, 10 things, but at the end of the day, our brains just want something that's super easy, that we can manage and that we can champion. So I'll stop there and then hand back over to yourself, Alison.
Great. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Zanele before we go into the breakouts? No? All right. Well, we'll have plenty of time to share and ask when we're back. And this is where the magic happens. Remember, there's no Ellevate facilitator in the breakout room. So just do some light introductions and then you can start sharing. We'll be there for about 20 to 25 minutes and come back. And I hope you have a great conversation and make some great connections. Thank you, everyone.